Hello, it's great to be together again, and we're looking at Psalm 98 today. Sing to the Lord a new song, for he has done marvelous things. His right hand and his holy arm have worked salvation for him. The Lord has made his salvation known and revealed his righteousness to the nations. I'm sure some of you have heard the story about the little boy who was in church every Sunday with his dad, but he didn't understand everything that was going on, and he would often ask his dad questions and try and find out some answers. He was an intelligent little boy. And one day, when he was chatting with his dad and they were talking about the morning service that they'd been at, one of the questions the little boy asked was this: Dad, what are all those things on the wall for? Like, there's a whole lot of names on it, Daddy. What's that all about? And his dad said, Oh, those names are the names of people who died in the services. Oh, I see, Daddy. Oh, right. Did they die in the morning service or the evening service, Daddy? Well, you can understand a child asking a question like that, because this child's impression of worship was that worship was about something dull and deadly, something that was boring. How far is that removed from the picture of worship that we have here in Psalm 98 and in so many of the Psalms? There is nothing dull or boring about worshipping Almighty God. If we are worshipping him as he wills, and not just with our lips, but with our hearts, in spirit and in truth, giving him our all. God never intended worship to be dull. In fact, quite the reverse. One of the marks of God glorifying and God honoring worship is not that it will be dull or dead or boring, but that it will be full of life, marked by joy, marked by praise. Sing to the Lord a new song, for he has done marvelous things. I love Eugene Peterson's paraphrase of these first couple of verses in Psalm 98. Just listen. Eugene Peterson writes in the Message, "Sing to God a brand new song. He's made a world of wonders. He rolled up his sleeves. He set things right. God made history with salvation. He showed the world what he could do." In worship, we're focusing on God. Worship is not about me. It's not about what I can get out of this. It's not about what my preference is or my favorite is. And I think there is a danger, let's be really, really honest, that we just want a form of worship that suits me best, rather than coming to a gathering of worshippers and focusing on God, seeing who he is, coming into his presence with thanksgiving and into his courts with praise, as we will discover in these Psalms later. It's also clear in this Psalm that different instruments can be used in the worship of God. Now, there is a surprise for some people, because we think only one instrument can be used in the worship of God. Just listen to verses 4 and 5. Shout for joy to the Lord, all the earth. Burst into jubilant song with music. Make music to the Lord with the harp and the sound of singing. The very last of the Psalms is Psalm 150. Read about the variety of instruments there that are mentioned in the worship of God. You know, some of us find it hard to understand that when the organ was introduced into public worship several centuries ago, there was opposition to this instrument being used. You know, that kind of noise was for the pubs, not for the worship of Almighty God. And there's a story told of a Presbyterian church in Scotland, and the elders were discussing as to whether they would have an organ in their Sunday worship or not. And one elder said, "We'll nae tin of whistles here." Well, an organ's much more than a tin of whistles. It's a beautiful instrument, but it's not the only instrument that can be used in the worship of Almighty God. All our gifts, all our talents, different instruments that can be played can make music to the Lord. One of the priorities in worship is that we are all using the gifts and the talents that God has given us in worship of Him. You see, worship is not to be an experience of the lifeless abode of the faithful. No, worship is about people praising Almighty God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength. And that's what the psalmist is getting at here. Now let's take a step back a moment. Is our worship marked by dullness or by joy? Is our worship lifeless, or are we a praising, grateful, thankful people? Are we using the gifts, the talents God has given us in the worship of Almighty God, or are we hiding them, neglecting them, suppressing them? Look at verses 6 and 7. With trumpets and the blast of the ram's horn, shout for joy before the Lord the King. Let the sea resound and everything in it, the world and all who live in it. Again, the Message puts it like this: shout your praises to God, everybody. Let loose and sing. Strike up the band. Round up an orchestra to play for God. Add on 100-voice choir. Feature trumpets and big trombones. Fill the air with praises to King God. Let the sea and the fish give a round of applause, with everything living on earth joining in. Verse 7. You see, this is the kind of worship that honors and glorifies God. Voices used in praising Him for who He is. Instruments used, a band or whatever it is. Now, worship is not about entertainment. Let's make that absolutely clear. And there is a danger in some streams today that worship is becoming more entertainment than actually the worship of an almighty, holy God. But part of worship is not only an appraising people, but an engaged people using all these gifts and talents. You know, the highest unemployment, and sadly, after this whole virus, we're going to have horrendous unemployment throughout our country and indeed in many other countries in the world. But you know where the highest unemployment is? In the Church of Jesus Christ. And I'll tell you why. Because some of us are spectators and some of us are participators. Some of us like to stand on the sidelines and sadly sometimes criticize those who are giving all they've got in serving God and in serving others. Are you and I willing to get involved? Or are we going to be standing on the sidelines criticizing others? Are we going to be part of a singing, praising, joy-filled, thankful people? Or are we going to be moaning minis? Apologies to anybody who's called mini. It's not you personally. We have a great God, and the psalmist tells us we're to sing to Him a new song. He has done marvelous things, and I am challenged by this about my own worship. Am I honestly a worshipping Christian, or am I more of a spectator? How important is worship in your life and mine? Is it a priority, or is it put on the margins? Let the rivers clap their hands. Let the mountains sing together for joy. You know, C.S. Lewis in his book, The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, has a wonderful section in which he talks about spring never coming. But when Aslan rose from the dead, the ice began to melt, the flowers bloomed, the trees turned green. It is poetical writing, but it describes something that will happen. The rivers will indeed clap their hands. The mountains will indeed sing, and we will all join in. This is the vision of worship that God had given C.S. Lewis. And it's a biblical one, and it's to be found here in this psalm that we're reading. God is calling you and me to be a praising, grateful, worshipping person, not a joyless, complaining, critical, moaning Minnie. Let's never forget how this psalm begins. Sing to the Lord a new song, for he has done marvelous things. Friends, we are a resurrection people. Let's demonstrate it. God bless you.